So, hi and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Mark Burnett and I'm the Knowledge Transfer Manager working in the Chemistry Industrial Biotechnology team at KTN. Now, in today's session, we're going to be looking at the deployment of technologies and processes that can make manufacturing more flexible, leading to more efficient processes and increasing productivity. So just to touch on about who KTN are, well, we're an organization that has an existing and ever-expanding network of innovators whose ideas will have this positive impact and transform the environment and the world that we live in. Now, the people at KTN have the expertise and deep understanding of all our industries and the sectors, and along with the knowledge of the innovation landscape, this means that we can help forge these powerful connections and collaborations between the organizations and the people within our network to accelerate that innovation that's needed to have this positive impact. So why we've been doing this series? Well, in 2016, 2017, Jürgen Maas led a team of UK industrialists to create this vision for accelerating the use of digital technologies. Now, from that review, there were four main areas of recommendations to do with adoption, innovation, leadership, and skills. Now, it also established some goals, which are shown on the top left of this slide. Now, the innovation strand of this program is led by Innovate UK, and it's known as the Made Smarter Challenge. And this will see up to £147 million investment from the government, along with funding from industry to support the uptake of digital technologies. Now, the benefits that are being hoped for within this innovation strand is shown as in the bottom left of this slide. So it's shown the targets for 2034. Now, the pie chart on the right shows the different types of interventions that are being funded and a number are already underway. So, for example, there's already been a couple of R&D funding competitions, as well as the Made Smarter Digital Accelerator. Now, there's more information on the madesmarter.uk website. Now, as KTN, we're delivering the network activity associated with this Made Smarter Challenge, and we're aiming to promote the latest projects, the technologies and developments, and create this community of collaborators and innovators to really support that productivity improvements needed in UK manufacturing. And this webinar series is actually an example of the activities that we're doing to provide insights into the art of the possible, and it's all starting from the viewpoint of the manufacturer. Now, another example of what we've been doing as KTN is there's the Smart Factory Expo, which is organized by the manufacturer, and KTN help organizes Innovation Alley. And Innovation Alley helps innovators exhibit and promote what their ideas are and pitch to other delegates attending the Smart Factory Expo. Now, if you'd actually like to be considered to be part of Innovation Alley this year, then please get in touch with us. We'd like to hear from you. Actually, if you've got an innovation, a story, a case study, something really interesting you want to share with us and we want us to share with others, then we'd also would like to hear from you. So again, please get in touch. Now, at the end of this recording, we'll be sharing the end of the webinar, we'll share the recording and you'll have access to these links, but please get in touch. Now, before we move on to hearing from our speakers, what I finally would like to point out, I've mentioned there Innovate UK funding, but it's also worthwhile noting EU funding. Now, the UK has agreed to be associate of Horizon Europe, so the new framework program, so we can actually get access to EU funding for research and innovation. Now, just as an example, under the second pillar of that particular framework, it's the global challenges in European industrial competitiveness, and there's a cluster within that called digital industry and space. Now, some of the funding calls of that work, those work programs have started opening in June, so it's worthwhile taking a look. And just some included themes within these areas. In the digital, we have things like AI, data and computing, robotics, digital economy, and under industry, we have digital and agile manufacturing. So something really relevant to what we're going to be talking about today. And it's a real good opportunity as well to work with our European colleagues. So something to take a look at. If you want to know more about that, again, please get in touch. So onto our lineup today, we've got a great lineup for you. First of all, we're going to be joined by GSK, who will share their vision around modular continuous manufacturing and the role of digital technology. We'll then hear from Zeton, who have worked with GSK as a systems integrator, helping GSK transform from that vision to taking their client requirements and taking that into a manufacturing facility. Then we'll hear from Perceptive Engineering, who started out as a UK SME, providing process monitoring control technology, and they'll be sharing their journey to where they've got to today, and also some of the capabilities they have. And then we'll also hear from CPI. CPI is part of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult in the UK, and they'll provide insights and benefits and opportunities of flux manufacturing within the area of biologics, and also the support and help that they can provide. So I think with that, I want to just hand over to Emily from GSK. Emily is a chemical engineering working in the technology translation group and is looking at how to take these innovative technologies into their business. So over to yourself, Emily.
Great, thanks for that introduction, Michael. So hi everyone, welcome. I'm Emily and I'll be taking you through GSK's vision for digitalisation and the future of manufacturing. So just as a quick intro to me, Michael's already very kindly kind of gone through some of this, so I won't go through in too much detail. But yeah, my role, I'm a technology translation engineer, and prior to that I started off on the GSK graduate scheme after getting my master's in chemical engineering. So from that programme I got a lot of experience in various different areas across plant, processing and data and analytics. And that really allowed me to build that link in skills between the engineering and the digital spaces that will be needed for the future of the vision that we're about to present. So I'm also joined today by Gareth Alford.
Thank you, Emily. So my name is Gareth Alford. I'm a chemical engineer by background. I've been working in the pharma industry for going on 20 years. 19 years of that is actually within GSK. Predominantly in new technology development and implementation, and I was involved in operating the first GMP pilot plant for continuous manufacturing in 2008, and I've gone on to develop a number of modular unit operations and platforms for manufacturing in our small molecule area, as well as actually looking at using these platforms within biopharm and also some of the new therapeutic areas as well.
Great, thanks for that, Gareth. So I'm now going to show a brief video on our vision for the future of manufacturing.
The modular concept is key to what we're doing. The basic toolkit of different reactor types and separation technologies, and what we're doing is modularizing. Building standard building blocks, like Lego, that we can put together in a sequence to execute a recipe that the chemist comes up with. 80% of those blocks will be workhorses that we'll use time and time again in different recipes. And the idea is, over time, as we go through more projects, we'll build a more expansive library. We'll have these building blocks on a shelf that we can then quickly assemble to execute different recipes. Agile Biopharm platform is the latest in a line of modular processing units, building on the experiences we've had industrializing the modular platform in the small molecule manufacturing business. It builds on the concept of modularization through hardware, software, and business systems, drawing on the delivery of a modular physical asset as well as a modular digital asset. The platform you see here is based upon a series of feed systems, bioreactors, and downstream purification modules. It consists of 24 modules in total, each one capable of operating standalone or as part of the overall manufacturing platform. Intensified manufacturing allows you to shrink the size of the manufacturing facility, the core piece that transforms your starting materials to your finished product. What you can do is either move that line to where you find your demand to be, so it's going to perform identically because it's the same thing, or you can replicate that line. You can copy it identically and have a replicant of the machine running in a second site to secure supply. If you bring in the digital side of it, then you create a digital twin, and with the overlay of the two, you can really bring to life a new way of manufacturing products. We can release things much more quickly. We can prove to regulators in real time that the quality of our products is good, which takes time and money out of the whole process. The real gain is in speed and time, because of the flow of data between systems and the greater understanding that it facilitates. It means you can turn everything around much more quickly. You can move over from product to product, and you can move products across sites. And we're talking about being able to do that in 30 days rather than a year. And that speed of decision, that adeptness, that also secures against risks. So that's where the benefit comes from, in time and agility. When you have established the digital asset platform and the associated digital engineering content management, you can start to explore the opportunities of the platform. Training using immersive techniques such as virtual and augmented reality can be streamlined to support agile manufacturing. We have a chance here to really modernize training. Operators have got used to having to read a lot of documents, but what augmented reality can do instead is show you from the point of view of when you're actually doing the process and give you the required information at the right time, and that is a real step change. That level of duplication is unsurpassed in terms of control. We've never seen anything like this before. The level of compliance we can get with an algorithm constantly looking at the entirety of how a process is running is very complementary to a set of operators that are experienced in looking at the process, which can help them make better decisions. By working with equipment suppliers, we can start to look at new aligned workflows, such as interactive maintenance tools and bridging business systems to reduce process handoffs. A platform based on modular assets allows us to have a clear line of sight of our process development. We can use the platform to enhance the parameterization of the operation of equipment, building an enhanced recipe that's able to track the development of the process. As the process becomes more intensified, the impact of the equipment will have greater weighting on the process, and recipe lifecycle management will be critical to be able to capture this, and the ability to cross-pollinate these learnings. With modules that are characterizing both the development pilots and manufacturing, we can start to build mechanistic models to fully define the process. This alignment allows the digital twin to be developed using both mechanistic and statistical models to work together for process assets, providing a full representation of the process. The library lifecycle management will allow the platform to develop, ensuring that the processing learnings can be fed back into the development of new modules. Learnings from the operational data and the models will be combined to continually improve the mechanistic model development process and ensure that processes are being continually improved. The digital revolution is clearly disruptive, and that is problematic for a manufacturing organisation that wants to get things right. But we believe we have the right people and the understanding to be able to make those steps while still securing our position. And our view is that if we don't, someone else will. GSK has to embrace this new technology because it's what the pharmaceutical industry is going to demand. Products that are always available, great quality, and at an affordable price.
Okay, so hopefully that video gave you a nice overview of our vision for modularization. And I'll now look at the Agile platform and the digital asset concept in a bit more detail, and also move on to look at some of the challenges and the opportunities that we have ahead. So the first thing you probably think of when you hear the words digital twin is a CAD model of the platform that allows you to explore it and all of its components. And that is part of it, and you can see that here overlaid onto the photo of the platform. But the digital asset really is so much more than that. The Agile platform has over 150,000 parameters once you consider the inputs and the outputs, and that's really a huge step change compared to some of our more traditional manufacturing lines. And we're working with different players in automation to really try and decouple that relationship between cost and volume of tags, so that you can have more freedom to choose exactly what data you want to collect. So we capture process, equipment, and operational data. And once you've got enough of that data, you can also start developing models of the process, which then feed back into your digital asset as well and become part of it. And this parameterization and the digital asset itself is what gives that transparency of information and allows the duplication of the manufacturing lines between the sites, as you saw in the video. So then building on the work that we've already done in this space, we're continuing to learn and develop in many areas, including some of those that we've called out here. So continuing on the theme of the data, there's a whole piece around effectively managing the life cycle of those parameters and the recipes that they feed into. And there's also the flow of data around the platform itself. So are you going to go for fully intermodular communications or have some sort of overarching orchestration layer or a combination of the two? And if it's a combination, how do you make sure that the right one is used for the right situation? Then also thinking about the philosophy itself, you need to keep true to that and to the standard framework for the modules with the data as that core structure. So you still have that flexibility of being able to use, for example, pump A or pump B. And then you could also think about expanding that philosophy outwards to the facility itself, so you get even more benefits from that rapid deployment and agility. So to wrap up, I don't think anyone really is going to argue that agility is going to be key for competitiveness, and also the need for a way to balance that with the regulatory environment and the quality demands that we operate in, or the role that the key role really that embracing digitalization is going to have in that. But for us, the biggest focus or highlight that we wanted to show here is that this is not an independent journey. We need to work together to push for change and recognize that we have a stronger voice as an industry rather than individual companies. And I think events like today are a really good demonstration of where that is happening. So with that, I will wrap up. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand over to our next collaborator.
Okay, well, thanks, Emily. That was really amazing. Any questions for Emily, please put in the chat box. What we'll do, we'll move straight on to our next speaker. And we have Rob Vandogen from Zeton. Rob is a senior basic design engineer and a leading design and build of pilot plants. So without me doing too much more, straight over to yourself, Rob. You're on mute, Rob.
Okay, can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, good. So thanks, Michael, and thanks, Emily, for your great presentation. My name is Rob Vandogen. I'm working now for 15 years at Zeton, and I'm leading developments of the smart modular platform within Zeton. I have 30 plus years experience in engineering, and I'm a chemical engineer from background. So that's a short introduction of myself. Bert Volker is joining the meeting as well. He's a control engineer, and he will be available during the Q&A session. If you have looked at the presentation of Emily, and you have seen in the video the number of modules that we have created for GSK. And I think these are great examples of the journey we have done together. So we provide, together with GSK, we are running in the forefront, of the technology, and we will try to realize some new ideas and have learned a lot in the past. Having said that, GSK is a front runner. We not work only for GSK, we work for all the major pharma companies at this moment in this field. So we have more experience than that has just been shown. Okay, so these are the business drivers, and this is actually the why question. And the why question is important because everything we do is related to this why question, and the patient is of course central, is a central position in this why question. We want to develop medicines for the patient as good and as quickly for them. If you look at the other things that happens in the background is that we have very risky processes. So risk is an important thing, risk in terms of process, but also in terms of economics for businesses, etc. So we have to ensure drug delivery, and there's also a change in market policy. meaning that we get more localized production. You see that also with the pandemic. A lot of drugs need to be delivered in a short time. So the agility is really no question anymore that we need to have that. That is a must. And we all think that the modularization is the answer to all these questions. But okay, modularization, that's a nice term, but what does that mean? So we try to set some rules for ourselves, so that we need to comply to if we make a new module. So first of all, we have made a catalog. We started with all the modules we have developed with GSK. As I said, we are developing more modules at this moment. We're also with other customers and asking to have some reviews from for example, GSK or the other ones. So that catalog is growing. If we look at a module, I have shown here one just simple PAM module. Then we need to keep in mind that we don't make a module for just one process. For this, at this moment, it is used for process A, and over time it will be used for process B or C, or even if we expand the capabilities, it will send to another location and it has to be used there. So typically we also try to maximize the operating window to achieve these goals I just discussed. So standardized interfaces, cleanability of course is important. I don't gonna mention all of them, but we also think, for example, CFR 21 is really important on the modules. And as you can see on the module itself, it has no screen. So we try to find solutions to still be CFR 21 compliant, even without a HMI installed on the module. As we think that we have an orchestration layer, we have model predictive control. So there are many instances that can set parameters on these modules. So we have to find solutions on the modules itself in the coding to come to a CFR 21 compliant module. MTP is mentioned not at this moment in this meeting, but I think many people have heard about it. It's called modular type packaging. That is a standard way of communicating between a module and a overarching system. And we think it's very important, but it's not the only answer to the flexibility we in the end need to have. So at Zeton we have created a module-to-module communication with the state model. And the state model is actually based on what is really well known in the packaging industry, PACML. We did some modifications for the process industry, and we are now able to communicate between module to module. And if a certain module comes to a hold state, so when an error has occurred, then the other connected modules can react accordingly and go to a suspended mode. That means that once the modules has been started, then we don't need that overarching system anymore as it would be in the past without module-to-module communication. So in the startup, it is still important, but running continuously, because that's what we talk about, continuously, then we have the system in place. So fully closed systems, smart instruments, these are the things we work continuously on to reduce the impact on the overarching system. Fully closed system, we think if we have a fully closed system, continuous production, that the demand of the environment will reduce, which could lead to cost reduction for the plant environment, for example. So these are the thoughts we have. I go to the next slide. The digital asset. Was also a topic for Emily. And what do we do at Zeton? So a 3D model that has been shown by Emily very nicely. We do get a lot of data behind this 3D model. So we have a VR environment at Zeton. We can share that with our clients. We can walk through these models, and we can get all the data that is associated with the instruments and equipment. We can show that already. But as said, it is if you look at the digital twin, it's not the only part that is adding value to the digital twin. It's also the process fluid models, and that is what we did recently. We started with that to develop MATLAB Simulink coding, which can run on the local PLCs for model predictive maintenance. We are just starting. We are not there yet. We continue working on that, and we believe that that will become important later on. So where do we going to use these models for? For software development, validating and testing, even for before builds, but also, as said, predictive maintenance, and maybe in the future, and I think that is not that far away, that we can set up a system such that a client can run the process virtually prior to delivery. That means that they can get a feeling on how to operate with these systems, get an idea on the data that is transferred to and from the modules, so that there's a better understanding of what the modular concept could bring to them. As we see at this moment that a lot of people want to step in the modular concept, they have an idea on what it is, but matching the ideas is still sometimes painful. And therefore we build up a system so that we can easily exemplify it to everybody. The target is, of course, that we get easy replication of all the modules and the physical assets. Of course, that is to support the speed up of the total process from R&D to manufacturing, from site to site, and be confident that if we copy a system to whatever location, that we can get the same product out of the same modules and configuration of modules. Okay, so this is an example of an animation. Okay, it's doing well. So of a setup, this is a backbone concept, and this is, I would like to stop this. Yeah, this is a backbone concept, a general backbone concept, which is independent from a process setup. This means so that we can run process A, B, C on this backbone concept. If we continue, then we locate bookcases in front of these backbone, and this is a bit more specific because this determines which modules can be located on which location. And what you now see is you put in the modules, and you can see you can set up a process very easily and quickly from a mechanical standpoint of view. And here you see another module where you can see the exchange of modules, meaning you see a swap of a reactor module. So we have to think about the control part now, because I stopped the video. You have seen swapping the reactors. So we call them reactor 1 and reactor 2. It could be either in process A or in process B and have a different function. So how does the control system recognize this? Get these parameters right for this reactor module, because these different processes have different values, temperatures, pressures, etc. So the concept is that we have it fully parameterized, meaning that there is no programming needed by a client or by an operator to get that full functionality of the modules. And this continues, so you can, the target is not just to be able to set up a process in a couple of days. It's even within 1 day. That is the aim we are going for.
Hi, Rob, could you a couple of minutes?
So this is the modular data flow, we think. So where there's a master recipe and we have to transfer that to a module-based recipe, and that is not, and I want to emphasize that it's not a batch recipe. We have also a model configuration. So as you have seen in the previous animation, certain modules on certain locations. So there is also a configuration tool. And this is what I call the recipe in total. And that need to be under change control. We see on the right side that the module is CFR compliant. There's an interface between the recipe and the modules, and there is an interface between the POL and the modules. And at the end, the philosophy is that the module production data is directly transported to the historian database. Okay, I go a bit quicker now. So assume that you have distributed manufacturing. That is, I think, the future. It could be on your own location, it could be with TMOs, etc. So Singapore, United Kingdom, you produce exactly the same products. You have to accept the same modules, and what we see is that we also have a building concept that can easily be expanded and replicated. So not only the modules, even the building concept, but the recipe should be central managed, and also the product data should be managed centrally. So that interaction to a central location is key. And you see on the front a truck with a module to show that it is really easy transportable all over the world. Here you see the example of the modular concept, which is brought into the modular infrastructure. This is really flexible, and on this side you see a drum filter and a conical dryer and a clean room, and this is more static setup, so that it would not easily change. In the previous slide, I forgot to say that you can set up with standard plant models, or how do you say, standard containers sized modules. You can set up different configurations. So you're very flexible with that. So even with standardization, you can do some changes. Is it far from our bed? No. Is it difficult to do? No. It is just a mindset, because this is a picture of a similar concept from another industry, which we have delivered. I think about 5-6 years back now. So I think the capabilities are there within Zeton. We are developing at this moment within Zeton the modular concept much more. Listen to many customers and do some research ourselves, to support our clients in the modular concept. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. That was fascinating. We just move quickly on to Perceptive Engineering, and I hand over to Nicola. First of all, Nicola is a chemist and marketing manager at Perceptive Engineering, and give a hand straight over to yourself.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be part of today's discussion, and hopefully builds on the excellent presentations that we've heard already. So I'd like to delve straight into perhaps a little about our perceptive journey across all of the high value sectors and the potential that we in fact see for flexible manufacturing. So Dave Lovett and myself would like to share some of our collaborative projects. Many you'll see are with some of the colleagues on the call today, and also have a look at the future based on extremely well-researched advances in process modelling and control, rather than perhaps the digital wizardry that it can sometimes be perceived as. So a little bit about Perceptive. Who are we? Fundamentally, we're an experienced group of specialist control engineers and developers. I think most importantly, it's the fact that we come with a wealth of practical industry experience across a very broad range of sectors. When it comes to industries, essentially to us, the raw data is agnostic, but it's understanding the application and what the data can tell us, which really is key to uncovering the potential for that optimization. So in terms of Perceptive, we were born out of Manchester University back in 2002. This essentially gave us the opportunity to start to close the gap between academic developments and the practical implementation to begin to deliver some robust industry solutions. So we began by delivering APC predominantly to the dairy, the steel, the paper industries. They may seem very different, but what do they have in common? Well, it's complex processes with vast amounts of data, which, as it turns out, was extremely good for Perceptive company growth. About 10 years ago, it became evident that the FDA was very supportive of pharma growth and development, particularly not being hindered by regulation, but being able to be a little more free to take advantage of many of these new process developments. So incorporating PAT, for example, modeling, process control. I guess much of what is often today loosely referred to as machine learning or artificial intelligence, which, as it turns out, we've actually been applying for decades. So we've already heard this morning how this is now opening up true flexibility in manufacturing, enabling rapid response for new formulations, responding to variations in market demand. I guess this has never been so amply highlighted as the recent need for speed, both in response to the need for vaccine development and mass production on a global basis. So we can all see the potential for developing commercially viable, personalized medicines, manufactured at the point of need. There are so many ways to define flexible manufacture. If we continue the Perceptive story, we were acquired last year by Applied Materials. Their particular strength is predominantly in semiconductors. So they are now looking to extend, or we collectively are looking to extend the optimization of manufacturing outside of semi to pharma and other high value process industries. What does that mean for Perceptive? Well, we're now part of an enhanced solution, which is now not going just from lab to pilot to manufacturing processes, but it's also encompassing things like predictive maintenance, full-scale scheduling. And of course, this all contributes to a much more flexible, optimized manufacturing solution. So it's in our DNA to be keen to share best practice, share ideas, avoid the concept of the digital wizardry. So I'd like to pass across to David, who's our Chief Strategy Officer, just to share some of our technical developments and perhaps a little of our view of how we see the future of flexible manufacturing. Thank you, David.
Thanks so much, Nicola. So yeah, as Nicola said, I'm Chief Strategy Officer now within the Applied Process Industries Group, their Automation Products Group. I set up Perceptive 18 years ago and led that as Managing Director. And during that time, you can see the story here. We got involved in an enormous amount of collaborative projects within the UK sector, very much tied in with KTN and Innovate UK and a lot of the catapult centres. So we put together 5 slides. We've only got time to do kind of a really whistle-stop tour of them, and I'll touch on a bit of the technical detail, which is really our focus is you've seen the kind of infrastructure and the basic automation layers that have been put in place. We kind of come on a supervisory layer on top of that, where we're applying advanced process control. We're integrating PAT at certain places and enabling precise control and optimization of multi-unit modular systems. So I'll go to the first one, which was, if I go in the right direction, there we go. So this was about 8 years ago. And I think that the main concept, it was called Made to Order Process Plant, and it was a microreactor, the CPI, and happened to be a oscillatory flow reactor at the CMAC, but we've done multiple kind of batch reactors as well. And the purpose of this was just to show whether we could really control something. Things were pretty small, kind of self-contained, and could we add PAT on, and what value was derived from adding PAT and a model-based controller, model predictive controller onto these process units? Were we able to really enhance the precision of control and safety of these units, and particularly with the continuous oscillatory flow reactor? It's quite a complex system with something like 15 or 20 temperature measurements along the kind of snaking reactor, and then we were measuring at multiple points particle size with FBRMs, and sort of integrating this PAT in as at the time in a sort of modular way as we could, using OPC UA, but the standards weren't that well developed. So this was, say, about 8 or 9 years ago. So that was the first thing we did, which was looking at can we make models which can be used repeatedly for multiple products, and as a different product came in, we had a mathematical model which was used within a model predictor controller to control the process. So that was the kind of the nature of this, and that was received well, but it was very much a, you know, an R&D project. And we'll get this the right direction. It's very complex for me to operate a mouse. So the next thing we did was it was, you know, a digital twin. This was under the Adopt program, and again it was modular. So the whole system was designed in CAD. It was built as an multi MSMPR systems, and we built the model predictor control and the PAT devices that went on top of it. So as you can see there, it's what we were trying to show there is with a mechanistic model, you could actually do a lot of the experimental design work and build monitors, controllers, and soft sensors in silico before you actually took it to the plant. And of course, it only really became a digital twin when you've got the physical entity. And then that physical entity, what we were demonstrating in this project was really how fast you could take the models and control system that you devised in silico and put it on a plant, and would it work, you know, right first time? And it was pretty close. You know, there was a little bit of adaptive modeling that took place after the event, once we put it on the physical plant, but it was incredibly close that we set up the whole configuration, the constraints, and all the aspects of the model-based controller in silico, and applied it directly to this process unit. And this was done in all these projects, I should say, were done very much in collaboration with CMAC, I think with Siemens on this one, and PSE, and many partners. So it certainly wasn't just us. We were focused on the PAT and the advanced process control systems. The next system here is one which we worked with the CPI, and its purpose was to demonstrate how we could control and scale up kind of complex liquids, complex formulations in liquids. So we're required to build, again, a model-based controller and soft sensors and PAT onto multiple vessels that you can see here. So there's a 10 litre, 100 litre, and 1,000 litre. And we were showing, you know, how the process behaves. So our process models and mechanistic models can be run in parallel with these process units in real time, and we can compare the performance of those models with the actual physical asset itself. Then moving on to a couple of commercial projects, and this one has been, you know, talked about quite a lot, but it's very much work we do with Pfizer and GEA, and we developed, again, the advanced process control and PAT integration system, which sat on top of the GEA automation system and their portable continuous, you know, miniature modularized platform, which has been deployed by Pfizer, I think, on 6 or 7 sites, and we're embedded into that system. And it's very much their movement into continuous manufacturing. And a number of other companies, including, as Gareth mentioned, GSK, had, you know, pursued this approach some years ago. And then finally, just moving away slightly from the sort of process industries, this is a project that we took under. We were commissioned by a company to work on this, and it was developing a cloud-based system which could connect. What you're seeing there is the modular unit, which will be attached to any kind of anaerobic digester. Now, the expectation is that digester will be of a certain size, and certainly running on a, you know, typical wastewater treatment plant, but also farm size as well. So, you know, kind of a 2,000 litre vessel, and that kind of justified the investment to put on this associated utilities and control system. So that was the again, a final one where we were asked, could we make this as modular as possible so we could roll it out to, you know, 50 different sites where these modules were being put. But what was interesting to us is it was our first cloud-based system. So again, this is going back around about 4 years, I think. So we ran this in containerized AWS and communicated to these systems remotely. So I think really time just permits me to say that now with Applied, we are very much looking at kind of enhancing what we've been doing in modular automation. We're looking at the standards. We're kind of working along the Pharma 4.0, certainly for work in the pharma sector, on this holistic production control strategy. We move from process development into the process and commercial manufacturing, and also into maintenance and scheduling. So that's all the kind of modules that we have. We look at tying in advanced PAT or soft sensors wherever possible through the production line, but introducing them as early as we can in the process development stages. And again, you can see here with the plug and produce philosophy and the rapid manufacturing in the chemical industry, those initiatives are things that we're partners in, and we're very much looking to develop further in those lines. But what's absolutely fascinating to me is what's been done in semiconductor. It's a completely new area to me. I've been working in the process industries for 30 years, and I'm seeing, you know, the modularization that you can see in the fabrication facilities. That I think Applied have about 500 fabrication facilities. They're the market leader, and all that they've done in multi-unit systems in semiconductor. I'd like to see some of that, you know, all the good things that the advanced metrology coming back into the process industries. So that's my mission for the next 3 or 4 years. So with that, I think I'll close and look forward to hearing your questions in the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola, David. That was great. So CPI has been mentioned a few times, so we'll hand over to Harvey and Abby to hear more about the support that CPI offer and the great work they're doing in the area of biologics. So Abby is a degree level apprentice in biotechnology, and Harvey is the head of technology and biologics. So over to you guys.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. It's great to be given the opportunity to demonstrate some of the projects that CPI have been involved in. So Abby and I are going to introduce you to one of the projects that's been run at CPI. I'm going to do an introduction, and then Abby will go into a little bit more detail. So the project we're going to talk about was an IUK funded project. It was a collaboration between PAL, GSK, Allergan, AstraZeneca, and SciEx, and it was very much set up to explore the challenges of basically taking established batch processes and moving them to continuous. So to help these companies understand those challenges, and in order to do that, we needed to build a system to allow us to test it, and that's the system that Abby will talk about. I thought it was useful maybe just to give a very quick overview of a biologic process. So Abby, you can go now. So we basically take a piece of DNA, we insert it into a cell. Now this is very flexible because that cell can make lots of different products. We just put different genetic information in. We then grow the cells up, like we've just seen. They make lots of protein, and only one of these is maybe our product. So we need lots of ways of purifying out the protein that we actually want before we can do some testing to check that its quality is okay, and then it could be applied to a patient as a therapeutic option. So this gives a very quick overview of the types of processes that we were working with and we wanted to move into continuous manufacturing. So I've worked quite a lot with, well, in manufacturing, and I'm aware that what we want here is a flexible solution. As GSK and various people have showed, we need to be able to move modules around, and we also want it to be digitally enabled. So if we work with single unit operations, they're very flexible. We can do them independently, but they're not necessarily particularly digitally enabled. And then I very much see a layering of things. So we put multiple unit operations in, it becomes more digital, and then we might make it continuous, then we might add more advanced process control, and ultimately we might be able to build a fully automated continuous process. Now, as we go through this, they become more digitally enabled because they have to in order to deliver, I mean, the ultimate goal maybe of continuous processing or maybe real-time product release. But certainly what we see is that complexity increases across this. Now, the complexity hopefully will never be seen by the operator because it needs to be a simple to use system, but built into the system, again, I think as you've seen within all the presentations so far, there's a lot of complexity. But what we've been playing with and trying to understand is how we can basically keep the flexibility, but make it more digitally enabled. So that's just my introduction, and I'm now going to hand over to Abby, who's going to go into a little bit more detail about the project that we worked on.
Yeah, Hi everyone, thanks Harvey for the introduction. So I thought I'd start by giving some of the advantages of continuous manufacturing within our biologics unit, as I know they're different for different platforms. So as it's been mentioned, continuous manufacturing has been around for a while in the chemical industry, but not so much in the biologics industry. So there's many advantages, hence why it's the focus of many companies. So the overall process time is reduced, which means there's less resources required. We then avoid the need for freezing in between the processing days, which the freeze-thaw process can impact your protein yield at the end of the cycle. We then look at less human interaction, so you have less times where any bioburden can be introduced into the product. The plant requires an overall smaller footprint to run the process, which is an advantage, obviously, and the equipment is pushed further to manufacture as much as possible, which also links to the consistency of the product, as everything's run on the same day as well, potentially the same day, depending on how long your process is, and often by the same people. So this is a small overview of one of our purification process flows, which was used in the IUK project. So just for those without any downstream technical knowledge, we do a concentration step to reduce the amount of product which will come into our process. A chromatography step, which is generally a protein A for the initial chromatography, followed by viral inactivation, a more of a polishing step chromatography method, buffer exchange, another chromatography, and then virus filtration. But as we'll see later on in the slide, it doesn't necessarily have to be in this order, which we'll see. So this is the setup of the lab, and it's what in practice it looks like at lab scale. So again, this is from the UK Continuous project, which we carried out at CPI. Each UO, which is unit operation, and I will say that a lot, so please remember UO is unit operation. It has its own switchboard in the desks. I don't know if you can see my mouse. So this allows for us to be able to move each UO around the lab by simply unplugging one plug from the wall, as the desks have all of the cables and ports connected to them. So we don't have to unplug everything, move it around in the lab, and then go again. So as you can see, this is a very complex system which is fit into a small lab, so it reduces our footprint massively. So we used distributed control system for base control, such as flow rates and our on-off signals. It was very much a rule-based approach, and PCS7 was our selected system. So looking at this schematic, this P and ID diagram is filtration 1, which is our first UO in this particular step. So this is set up in parallel. The filtration is preset to filter A, and when the pressure level is reached, which we would manually input into the system beforehand, the system automatically switches to filter B. So this means there's less downtime in between blockage of the filters, allowing for the continuous processing to happen. We have the option to add filter A back in line by priming it offline. So from an operator's point of view, it did take the complexity of the system away. We didn't have to constantly check pressures of the filters. We didn't have to constantly check them to make sure we had one ready to swap out, because we'd get the alerts and it would stop the pumps for us, so we didn't have the risk of overpressure in the system. And obviously it didn't need to be watched, so we could either have less operators, or the operators could be focusing on other essential tasks. Each unit shares the feed and product surge tanks. A system of valves control the path between the feed, buffer, UO, product, and waste. And I guess the main aim for the system was to ensure both fast process development and real-time release was both possible. So the UOs are connected to the next in the exact same fashion for every building block, no matter what type the building block is. So each UO interacts with the supervisory process control system. The setup phase was mainly manual and quite specific. So we would flush filters, run EQ methods on the columns to prep the system. The processing step was automated. It balances flow and holds the UOs when needed. So when there's not enough product in the tank beforehand to be processed, it would hold and wait for the right level. And the shutdown step, that was automated and involved progressive termination of the product. So when UO1 shut down, UO2 wouldn't then shut down prematurely. It would shut down once all of the product had processed through. So we got the maximum amount of processing, which in turn increased our yield. So this is the flow of the process which we showed before, and here's just one example of how we can very easily swap the process around depending on the requirements of that in particular product. So the benches were moved to rearrange the UOs, and the PCS7 system was also easily set up to account for any changes using method-based approaches. So it's important to note how flexible this was. So the yellow boxes show which UOs were changed in this instant, but it's essentially limitless. You can put it in whatever order fits the needs for that run. And it was very simple to upload them changes onto PCS7. In each UO, they worked in the exact same way, just the order was different. And back over to you, Harvey.
Thank you, Abby. I think it's worth just noting, I mean, Abby did say she is a degree level apprentice, but all of what she's talked about, only she's learnt while working at CPI, doing her degree in terms of helping to develop this system and also run it. So it's very practical experience, and it's a credit to you, Abby, how far you've come. So just as a quick sum up, we showed you the idea of the highlights of the automation. We can basically, we are trying to use off-the-shelf systems. We were even able to incorporate legacy systems. So we weren't wanting to build bespoke solutions. We were wanting to use off-the-shelf solutions that were available, but we could integrate bespoke if we needed. We wanted to make use of existing control software. I mean, Siemens PCS7 was used, but it could be done with any distributed control system. But the configuration was different. You know, a lot of automated processes, you know, have a configuration of a distributed control system that's obviously specific to them. But we were trying to come up with a solution where we could make use of that available technology, but in a more flexible way. And the rest of you can read all of the other highlights to there. As part of this, well, we now have a second continuation project onto this. We're really looking at approaching this sort of continuous manufacturing in sort of with different levels of automation, so that the system that you see here really provides us a base level of automation that allows us to run continuously. The follow-on project is very much going to look at how we can bring in more advanced control strategies, such as have been demonstrated today. And we're also going to explore the use of different types of surge tank. So there's we're going to move into using some 3D printing approaches to print what we're calling smart surge tanks to try and reduce the inventory in our system. So that's all to be done in the follow-on project. And with that, I think I can hand back to the KTN.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Harvey and Abby. I think we've heard some great presentations during this session, so thank you to everyone. We've got a little bit of time for probably a couple of questions, so I'll just jump into some of the ones that have gone into the chat. I think the first one is actually for Emily and Gareth. Around the agility platform, I suppose, are there advantages from a sustainability point of view, recycling? You know, what are there other benefits apart from just the flexibility?
Do you want to go first, Emily, or shall I?
Yeah, sure, I can go first, Gareth. So yeah, in terms of sustainability and agility, GSK has got some very ambitious sustainability goals at the moment, and I think it's something that all of us on the ground were very pleased to hear about when it was announced, because it's kind of things that's already on our mind. But in terms of agility and how this kind of manufacturing can have an impact on that, I think one of the key things is what was highlighted in the video around that kind of concept of having a library of modules that you use over and over again. It's kind of moving away from, you know, designing a process for a specific product or project, building a large plant, running it for the life of that molecule, and then, you know, that's kind of end of life for that asset. So I think, you know, really the concept is pushing towards reusing a lot of our equipment, and kind of in that sense is less wasteful. You also have the fact that you're kind of shrinking your footprint, and using less resources in that sense. And if you can kind of expand it out to the facility as well, you can also then start to look at things like utilities. So I think it's very complementary. I don't know if Gareth, you want to add anything there?
No, I think you covered most of it. I think that the key reason why we actually went modular in the first place, actually in the small molecule space, was because as you actually go to more continuous intensified manufacturing, it's more bespoke. And what we were seeing actually, again, because we have a high attrition still in our R&D to manufacturing phase on there, that actually trying to do that each time was actually sort of cost ineffective. And so that modularity allowed us, as Emily rightly put, to actually be more agile in that development phase, and effective then to lock the machine then when you actually sort of, you had a successful product going forward. The other big bit, which is more around sort of the intensified part of them and the modularity again, so that they're all interlinked. That intensification is actually, you know, in the biopharm space, we're looking at sort of an 80% plus reduction in overall footprint compared to a traditional environment. And then when you start thinking about a lot of these systems also being closed versus open, all of the associated operational aspects of that as well, in terms of, you know, air movements, you know, having clean air environments on there, there is a huge benefit in actually sort of intensifying and then using the modularity to actually sort of provide that flexibility piece as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
May I have one question for Emily and Gareth, and that is regarding the single use, because that's also a topic. If you look at waste in the biofarm project, we use single use, but is that for you a set point that we need to go to single use, or are you open for that?
It's a good one, Rob. With regard to that one on there, I think it's about choosing the right thing for the right process on there. And what we're also seeing now is that potentially continuous and single use, there are strengths and weaknesses when you bring some of those together. We've predominantly gone single use actually in the big batch environment on there, and there's some very strong reasons why we've done that. When we look at intensified on there, and you actually start to shrink the overall footprint, but you actually increase the amount of single-use material actually against that footprint, that is something to be reevaluated. And it's actually something that GSK is currently doing at the moment with a group called ERM, is to actually look at the existing batch overall sustainability piece, and then the continuous, and actually then look at it from a single-use versus traditional sort of steel environments on there as well, and to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. And it's an interesting one, because what we'll actually want to put is actually those sustainability parameters can be built into our digital twins going forward as well. So you can actually assess those in real time when you're actually looking at the options for manufacturing.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Rob, and it's something that actually surprised me when I started working in this kind of environment. But I think, as Gareth said, it's about looking more holistically, and sometimes, you know, the energy and kind of chemicals and everything involved in cleaning can actually potentially sometimes be worse than those single-use items that you're using. So as Gareth said, it's a very case-by-case basis and choosing what's best for each given application.
Rob, I've got a couple of questions around, I think, the complexity of moving the modules around, how you connect them together, mixing the sort of the PLC control software with the sort of modular capability of it, you know, about finding errors, how you do that, what are the challenges and complexities associated with that?
Yeah, so thanks for the question, and I will start answering. And if Bert wants to add to this my comments, then please go ahead, Bert. So the concept of generalization is really important. So if you have a pump module and you have a reactor module, whether it's a CSTR or a plug flow reactor, you have to make them, have to generalize these. So that is what we do with the state model, meaning that we have standardized states where every module knows what the other module is doing, and this is really important. If you look at setting up these modules, we have introduced RFID to do recognition of position recognition, so that we do know upfront that we have to put module A in slot A1. See it as an Excel sheet. You have A1 as a position, A2 as a position, and you can recognize whether a module is in a position. So you can electronically validate the position of that module and verify it against your recipe, which is describing this position. Also, what is recorded or written down in the recipe is which modules are connected to each other. So you have two modules, let's say a feed A and a feed B, and they need to be fed in ratio. In the recipe, we say, okay, these two are connected, and if one is turning up, the other will turn down, and that is done directly via the module-to-module communication. We don't need to have that overarching system for that reason. So the concept is really that also, if you have a pH control in a CSTR, that you have a pump module that is receiving a set point from the CSTR, also directly from the CSTR, without having the POL as an intermediate communication step. So this is what's really important for us to get that response of the system. If you would rely on the POL, we would never have that response. And so actually we bring all these modules together, and in that respect, actually, for the operator, it's no difference anymore. The pump module gets its task. It has to deliver a flow rate X, and it takes care of that. And if that is not done properly because there is an error, it generates an alarm. It goes to a hold state, and the connected modules will react accordingly on that error. So that is really, yeah, a flexible way of setting up these modules.
Thanks, Rob. If I could just ask a quick question to David. I know that we've had a sort of quite a heavy pharma focus, but I also know Perceptive have been doing a lot of work with different sectors. It would be nice to just see what your thoughts are about how flexible once you've got the digital technology, how adaptable are the challenges, problems the same, regardless of sector? Is there a lot we can learn from other sectors?
Yeah, I think it was partly answered by Gareth there, saying that in product development, so in a number of the sectors in product development, you might be developing product that is actually just for a small production run, a commercial production run. So we are finding where we're asked to put on, we see modular pilot plants. We see pilot plants that have to be modular and flexible, using a plug and play approach, that they'll be producing a lot of short runs, but those short runs will need to be ready for commercial sale. So in that sense, I said outside of pharma, it's not GMP, but it isn't just kind of in the R&D exploratory space. It is actually for commercial production. So I think we've seen quite a lot of that in the fast moving consumer goods. Actually, commercial operation. And the other things that we talked about really were just pushing the boundaries of, I think, of advanced process control, PAT, and demonstrating, do you really get advantages from controlling the final quality parameters and adjusting all the inner loops, if you like, on the process plant? Did you get a genuine benefit by being very flexible and dynamic and responsive to nonlinear systems and behaviors? So that was kind of the approach we were looking at. And the answer was yes, we did get benefit into the precision of control and the optimization of multi-units. And that is equally applicable in other sectors than pharma. Again, most sectors have multiple process units in manufacturing. So they're not all, obviously the process intensification, they become very, very modular, very, I mean, what we saw there in what Rob showed and what Gareth has showed is a very kind of tiny footprint. But the same mathematics and algorithms are used, even if it's a much larger footprint, and it's covering a whole production plant with 15 units. I mean, you could look at semiconductor as being a classic example of that, of dozens and dozens of process units, very non-linear, fast acting, feeding back within each process unit and feeding back at the end of the production run. As an overall optimization for all units. So yeah, in a roundabout way, I think I've answered your question.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And just quickly, I'd like to come to Abby. Someone's asked a question around scale up and some of the challenges related to it. And it's asking, is the approach that you're looking at, can that actually be translated into large scale?
Abby, do you want to get this or should I?
Go on, Abby, make a start and then I'll sum up.
Okay, so we did scale up. I think our largest scale was about 100 litres. Obviously, there were challenges in that, given the process start to finish took about 48 hours, and with us being R&D, we didn't have process operators, so it meant us doing that in shifts. I guess that was the main challenge. Harvey, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Abby. Yeah, the concept can certainly be scaled up. The control approach is effectively agnostic to unit operation scale. So we could easily, each of the unit operations we made use of, how to scale them up are well understood. So we could just put bigger versions of the same approach into the same control system and obviously process a larger volume.
Okay, that's great. Well, just looking at the time, I think it just leaves me to say thank you very much for all our speakers, all the panel, taking the time to join us. I think we've had some fascinating insights into what is actually possible and some great things to take away from that. If we haven't managed to answer your question, we'll look to follow that up with the speakers afterwards. But it leaves me now to say again, thank you very much. And we can now move towards our networking session.